Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee for today, April 17th. I've been joined by Council Members Fletcher, Gordon, and Cunningham, and I believe Councilmember Ellison will be joining us shortly. I'm going to move the consent agenda, which are items 2 through 6. They include the regular liquor, business, and gambling licenses, a license settlement conference recommendations for Sally's Saloon, a rental license reinstatement for one of the Steve Friends properties at 1728 2nd Avenue South and 1801 3rd Avenue South to a new owner, a low bid for non-emergency board up, and setting a public hearing for the reappointment of Noah Shuckman as Director of Regulatory Services for May 1st. Are there any items anyone would like to pull, items 2 through 6? Seeing none, I'll move the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. We'll then move to our public hearing, which is item number 1. Ms. Roberts, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the public hearing today is for the applicant Mayflower Holdings, LLC. The DBA is Jefe Urban Hacienda. The address is 219 Main Street Southeast in Minneapolis. The requested license is to upgrade from a Class E license to a Class C1 license, which would allow the licensee to have music for musicians of 3 or fewer at the establishment. There's no other changes to the business plan for the business that has been in operation and in good standing since 2015. Because this is considered an upgrade, there's a public hearing requirement for the business, and notices were sent out to property owners and residents within 600 feet of the premises. We did receive one response back in favor. The lead license inspector Greg Benning is making a recommendation for approving this license because it meets minimum standards.
Are there any questions for Ms. Roberts on item number 1? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on item number 1, which is a license upgrade for Jefe Urban Hacienda. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Come on up. If you could give us your name and address for the record.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Arundel, the owner, 247 10th Avenue South. Just want to say thanks for your time. It's not a dramatic thing. We don't really have a plan for music, but we try to be good operators and be compliant. And on some holidays like Cinco de Mayo, we may want to have a band. And so this will be one of the least dramatic approvals, I believe, in the history of the council. Thank you.
Thank you for being here today, Jeff. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Jeff for operating a good establishment. And we've gotten positive feedback on this proposal, so I'll move approval.
Approval has been moved. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll move on to our discussion items on the agenda, starting with Mr. Carroll in item number 7. I'm sure you're thrilled to be back here in front of us today.
I always am, especially on a fine spring day like this. So before you today, you have staff recommendations regarding the projects that have indicated an interest in pursuing brownfield grant funding in the spring round. The grantor's application deadline is May 1. The city had a pre-application deadline on March 9, which is how we know which projects are interested. The city's next internal deadline is actually tomorrow. So all these projects are working very diligently to get their quote-unquote final applications to us by tomorrow. We try to get them about 2 weeks before the final deadline, so we have one opportunity to review them, make final corrections, et cetera, et cetera. In this round, we have 18 projects that gave us, I think, a total of 38 pre-applications. The reason there are so many pre-applications is that all these projects have the discretion and ability to apply to either one grantor, 2 grantors, or all 3 grantors, and many of them apply to all 3. We have 13 housing-related projects, 2 investigation projects. Those are projects that are in the very early stages and are trying to determine the nature and extent of the contamination at the development site. We have 3 commercial projects, a hotel project, a food hall project, and a brewery with a dog park, which is, I think, a first for Minneapolis as far as I know. The staff report indicates how much they're seeking from each grantor and the total amount that they're seeking. We always tell them that the amounts they give us in the pre-applications are not binding. In many cases, as they continue to work on their applications right up and through May 1, they decide they want to reallocate the money in some ways, and we're fine with that. These are all projects that have been reviewed by staff. There's a form we crafted a number of years ago called the Grant Assessment Worksheet. We use that to try to develop information about project readiness because over the years, the grantors have shown more and more interest in making certain that the projects that we send forward are actually ready to go. They are unhappy when they award grant funding and a project doesn't proceed or changes in some significant way. So we use the grant assessment worksheet to assess things like whether or not they currently own the property. If they don't own the property, do they have a signed purchase agreement? How much of their financing or funding is in place? What amount of interaction have they had with the affected neighborhood groups? What positions have the neighborhood groups taken? We ask whether they've initiated in contact with the council member from the affected ward. So folks like you don't hear about these projects for the first time when I'm standing up here. We ask about whether they've submitted their paperwork to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency because they have to have an approved response action plan by May 1 if they want to clean up property. And if they don't have that, they don't meet the prerequisites for the grantor. So we ask them all those questions. We have a point system. We add up the points and we try to assess whether the projects are pretty much ready to go. It's rare that a project touches on all those points, but they often have many of them. We have not found any fatal flaws with any of these projects. Many of them have things they still need to resolve, but they can continue to work on that right up and through May 1, and then the grantors take about 2 months to review the grant applications. And sometimes there are developments during that span, and we convey that information to them also, neighborhood approvals, land use approvals, et cetera. So we're basically recommending all 18 of these projects and all 38 applications. All these developers and consultants are, as I said, working to get those applications completed. I hope you noted that in the staff report, we added a section regarding the affordable housing topic that you raised at the last meeting when I was here in February. We've given a lot of thought to that. We've tried to craft a procedure for addressing that we think is logical and collaborative and has the highest likelihood of coming up with options for you to consider that will accomplish the goals that you have in mind. And I can briefly run through the points that we've recommended, the steps that we're proposing to take, or I can just field questions if you have them.
This is the points you've made with regard to the steps you're willing to take are for the next round, correct?
You have indicated, yes, that you'd like to give consideration to implementing changes, if any, in the next round. I think that's a fair and appropriate thing to do. The projects that are now giving us applications are pretty much ready to go. The grantors will only fund them if we can say to the grantors, if you award this money in June or July, these projects will then begin the cleanup or the investigation. They have to be pretty much ready to go because they're so far along in what's in many cases a multi-year planning process. Many of them have said we've got our financing in place, there's interest rate locks, et cetera. It's hard to try to persuade people to change course now, but if we get to them soon enough with regard to the next round, and we can say, you know, our council is giving consideration to perhaps modifying the way we handle these grants. They have reasonable lead time. We've got opportunities to interact with them and get their input and convey that back to you.
So my point being, that'd be yes. So my point would be we should discuss that in the context of making changes to the program criteria for our approval outside of discussing it within these projects. Or I might just point out that there are projects in my ward that have no affordable housing or high-end market rate. And if they had pollution remediation, they should have taken care of that in the purchase price. Or they could put affordable housing in. We're moving towards a developer mandate, whether there's any public money in it or not. So I can't imagine, given that there's public money going into, if they receive these grants, every one of these projects, that we wouldn't want to prioritize. And if we couldn't prioritize, not put on our list projects like, you know, Calhoun Towers, Sons of Norway, 12th Street Tower, all of which are high-end luxury projects that are getting public assistance but don't meet our criteria for affordable housing. So I think I'm in a calm way summing up what I've heard from other people. The other people could comment if they'd like, but I don't think that we should have this conversation in the context of the projects in front of us. It's not their fault that we're moving in this direction, but I think there needs to be a separate conversation prior to the rounds happening next time. This set of projects, in my opinion, is especially egregious because it's basically all luxury market rate housing. And if our strategy is going to be build as much as you can, density is great, and it will trickle down, then we're no better than the Republicans who don't care about affordable housing at all. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there may be ways that we disagree about the characterization of a trickle-down strategy, but I do think we're in strong agreement about moving towards making sure that public dollars are going to projects that advance our affordability goals. I think that a lot of my frustration, I'm glad that you're asking whether they've met with my office if they're in my ward. But if they answer yes, what they're affirming is that they came into my office. I asked them, can we include any affordable units in this? They said, no, we're not interested in that. I said, what if we bring some resources to bear? They said, no, we're still not interested in that. And then they checked the box. And so for that very frustrating conversation to advance their application, when my goal is to try to get affordable housing project built in the city, doesn't feel appropriate to me. And there are certainly a couple of projects that fall into that category where that's been the content of my conversation when they've come into my office. So I am looking forward to seeing us prioritize. There are some very good affordable projects coming down the pipeline that I want to make sure get prioritized by our city so that they do get the funding and don't get pushed out by market rate projects, because we really shouldn't be putting public dollars towards projects that are building market rate at this point.
And I don't disagree with any of that. I would mention just in passing that the composition of each grant round varies. It changes a lot. When I was here in February, we were accepting grants from the fall 2017 round. There were 9 affordable housing projects in that round, all of which got some or all the funding it was seeking. There were three market rate projects. So the composition changes from time to time. And I know one of your concerns was that that maybe the market rate projects are crowding out the affordable housing projects. And we've started that research already. I've gone back a year. I'll continue to go back. I haven't found a single instance yet of an affordable housing project not being able to get brownfield grant funding. Sometimes they don't get it the first time they try because of readiness issues, but they pretty much always get it eventually. So I don't think that's happening, but I would agree that perhaps there are things we can do to encourage, which was the word that you included in your direction, encourage developers to do more of what they're not currently doing.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It started out as a way to make sure that affordable housing projects weren't trumped over market rate projects, but now it's turned into there's public money in these projects, period. And so why would we want to see public money going into a project when I just asked a developer today in a meeting that I had with them, why don't you put some affordable in? Thank you for that feedback. I said, well, we're going to get to the point where we're going to demand it of you. Thanks for letting us know. They didn't even say, well, all right, maybe we should try to solve the problem on our own before you mandate it on us. They just outright, as I think Councilmember Fletcher said kindly, just agreed to disagree. And so this is not now about whether or not these projects are crowding out others. It's about philosophically whether or not we think that if you get any public money, you shouldn't have to meet our goal. And again, I heard someone down the line say here, so I don't think it's just me who thinks this. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the whole report, but also that you've responded to the staff direction a little bit here. And one of the things you talk about is developing options for us to consider in the future. And it looks like there's some question if we'll be able to get those recommendations to us in time to consider for the fall round, or whether we should next year. And I'm wondering what we could do to help make sure, because I agree, I think we should have any kind of new guidelines or criteria set ahead of time before we've seen any potential applications, and with plenty of time for everybody to know in advance that they're coming. So what would be a timeline for us to expect you to come back so we might have an opportunity to influence the fall decision making?
Well, working backward from the fall deadline, that's November 1. Our pre-application deadline is typically early September. That's too late. I mean, we typically start sending out information about our early September deadline in early August. So if we have a discussion with you about this, we need to be doing that in the early to midsummer, I think, at the latest. By that point, we'll know what the results of this round are. We can see how the affordable housing projects in this round fared in comparison to the market rate projects. That will be enough time to complete the research that we've done. It will be enough time, I think, for some engagement with the grantors, because I think we need to interact with them. I know their view is that, they have public dollars that they're marshaling and using in certain ways. Elected and appointed officials have decided, how the projects that come to them should be ranked and scored. At least 2 of the 3 grantors already give preferential treatment to affordable housing projects. So maybe we need to suggest to them they need to give additional attention to that, because, whatever we do, they're the ultimate arbiters of who gets the money and who doesn't. So we want to engage with them about that. They have a a strong interest in seeing lots of applications from Minneapolis. I think we're their primary user in many cases. We actively promote their programs. I like to think we've got a reasonably well-oiled machine now. We get the word out, we get the applications in, we help them fine-tune the applications. They want to see those applications continue to come from us because it helps them justify the continued existence of their grant program. So I do think we want input from them. We want input from developers, constructive, useful input and interaction. And there are other nonprofit organizations that are involved in aspects of this, like the Environmental Initiative. So that's a lot to do in a short span of time, but I am clearly feeling your sense of urgency here and your desire to do something sooner rather than later. So we will try to get something on your agenda for the early to mid-summer with some options for you to list and some recommendations from staff.
That sounds good. And I had a couple other questions. Good, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course.
Some of these grants don't go to housing projects at all, right?
Right.
So those would be held separately, or maybe there could be different recommendations we could look at if we're supposed to tweak anything about those that are more targeted towards employment opportunities in commercial or industrial sites. But I think we're mostly just talking about the housing applications.
We as staff will focus on that. I think all the grantors, and especially DEED was the first grantor to create brownfield grant funding back in, I think, 98. They initially got only commercial and industrial projects. It's been a relatively recent development that housing projects and market rate housing projects have been seeking this type of funding. So we're going to focus our analysis mostly on the housing components of this. But we will look a little bit at the commercial component because there are some projects that have large commercial components and then some related housing. So it's going to get broad in that way, but our focus will be on the housing part.
And then my last question is if there are, maybe you can do some research about this too, because we might not know it now, but if there are other cities or jurisdictions that have done something similar where they've identified if you're receiving any public money, then we're going to raise, or if we're going to recommend you to apply for, or that can be a little bit fuzzy right now. But do they stipulate affordable housing must be there? I think that would be really helpful if we found out, oh, St. Paul's already doing this or something, or this is something they do in Seattle or Chicago or Bloomington or whatever. So a little research there could help us get a better understanding.
We will certainly do that. There are best practices out there and we can find out who's doing what.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to say thank you for the amount of information that was provided and also the seriousness of the staff direction. So thank you. I went through and read what the review of the different points of what the questions are, the research questions, and where folks are going to be. So like the comprehensive analysis that you had mentioned earlier, much to the chair's point, what I see in the first three sort of research areas really kind of more go towards have the affordable housing projects have those gotten pushed out, and so we've already based on that we've heard no, and so then we're getting to the philosophical question about public dollars and affordable housing. So I think that to deepen what Councilmember Gordon was saying, I think that a research question that we're really trying to get to is what would the impacts be if it was mandated, if there were changes like other cities have done, to have that analysis, I think would really be able to get us the kind of, that will be more of a research question to get the information that we are looking for here.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. Anecdotal information is already coming in. I had a meeting with the grantors last week to talk about one of these projects, and the developer said just at the end of the meeting, we're doing a project in Bloomington, and we put X number of affordable units in that project in exchange for Y amount of financial assistance from the city. So it's being done elsewhere, and that's what you said about looking for other examples. You know, what are they doing? How is it working, et cetera. So we'll make sure to include that.
Further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm going to move approval of Mr. Carroll's recommendations in item number 7, which is parts 1 and 2 and 3. Are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. Thank you very much, Mr. Carroll.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 8. I see Mr. Trell. Okay.
Madam Chair, council members, I'm Jim Terrell with the Business Development Division of CPAD. The report that you have before you supports the staff's recommendation of approval of a $220,000 loan to the Lopet Foundation. The Lopet Foundation is a 501c3 organization founded in 2002. Its focus is on serving underserved youth and family, while the organization and part of its operation is currently based in Golden Valley on land that is owned by the Minneapolis Park Board. This project or this loan request and recommended approval is for the Lopet Foundation's acquisition and renovation of a facility in North Minneapolis at 3800 Humboldt Avenue North. The Lopet has already purchased it and closed because the seller needed to close urgently, but they've done so out of pocket, and so this is the normal way that it would have been financed. There's a total of $270,000 of city assistance requested. Staff has already approved a $50,000 loan from its 2% loan program for the rehab of this facility. We make note of the fact that of the individuals served by the Lopet Foundation, some 1,000 or more students are from Minneapolis Public Schools, a great number of them from North Minneapolis. The project before you, the funds that are coming from or recommended to come from city funds are exclusively for the commercial building at 3800 Humboldt, even though the overall sources and uses shows a much larger project, which includes the new trailhead facility on the Park Board land in Golden Valley. This project is beneficial in a couple of ways. It activates the building at 3800 Humboldt, but it also assists the larger project qualify for the New Markets tax credit allocation that they were able to receive, that money going to the trailhead facility in Golden Valley. We're proud of the fundraising effort. You'll notice that approximately in the financing sources, about $5.1 million of an overall $7.5 million project came from equity from the capital campaign. That represents about 68% of the total project costs. The council memo includes a detailed description of the loan terms requested, the sources and uses of funds. We do want to make note that the Development Finance Committee reviewed the loan request and approved it on April 10th. And we're particularly proud of the number of individuals that have worked on this project. It's not in the memo, but we worked closely with organizations such as Sunrise Bank, Bremer Bank, Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC, and the Minneapolis Foundation. The Park Board was involved. The earlier phase of the project got about $3 million of funding, both from Park Board and from state bonding. So really the overall project is about a $10 million project. One small sliver is all that's needed from the city to get it over the hump. Chair Goodman recognizes that about a year and a half ago, the request was for $1 million. That presented a particularly large challenge. While we worked out at least a concept where we could have brought this before this body for approval, when we met with finance, we really didn't have a source of $1 million, so it wasn't a credit problem, it was a source of funding problem. So we went back to the drawing board, found other partners to help reduce the request of the city to the $200,000 net, $220,000 with the loan loss reserve that we're contemplating here. So overall, we're proud of all of the players, all of the work, and we wholeheartedly and enthusiastically recommend the project. One last note, some of you are aware of, there is a possibility that down the road, the greenhouses of this particular site would be separated, divided the actual real estate parcel, and the greenhouses could be leased or sold to Project Sweetie Pie, who has great interest in activating the greenhouses to further their mission of local healthy food initiatives. So we're recommending it, and for those who have questions, the executive director of the Lopet Foundation, John Munger, is here.
Are there any questions for Mr. Terrell? Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to first off by saying thank you so much for all of your hard work on this. I know how challenging this project has been from multiple angles, and so thank you so much for your persistence and really looking under all the rocks to figure out how we can get some more funding so that we were able to get down to this 270. So thank you very, very much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Of course. I guess I can hold my question actually if we're going to be pulling. Are we having Mr. Munger come up as well to speak to it?
Sure.
Cool.
Mr. Munger, welcome. Could you state your name and address for the record?
John Munger, 1211 Washburn Avenue North.
All right. Thank you so much. I just wanted to connect directly to say thank you. And there has been some folks are kind of in the community are not totally clear about what the space is going to be used for. So could you give just kind of an overview of how that particular building is going to be activated?
Yeah, so the building, I'm sorry, Madam Chair and Councilmember Cunningham. The space is about 14,000 square feet. It's got a number of different program elements, right? So there is a large gathering space that is a public facility and will be welcome to anyone coming in from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. each day. There is a cafe space that's run by Tiana Washington. It's called Cajun Twist, and that will be open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. each day as well. It has windows to the outside and to the inside. There's a gathering space outside with tables and chairs as well, kind of a terrace area. So similar to what you might find at Tin Fish or Sea Salt or something. And then there is public bathrooms. There are locker room facilities. Those will be on more of a subscription/membership basis. There's a strength and conditioning room, which is kind of that same type of idea, or you might sign up for a yoga class or whatever. And there's a garage door that opens up onto the outside, so you can do it inside or outside.
Cool.
But then, really the important part about the facility. Oh, and I'm sorry, there's also a bike and ski shop in there as well. So we'll be doing.
So could you maybe just talk about what's going to be at 3,800?
3,800. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. I was answering the wrong
A
question.
bike and ski shop would be a great answer.
I got really excited. I was like, "Oh, that's going in there." Yes. All right. So let's try it one more time. So what's happening at 3,800 Humboldt?
I read your mind, Councilman.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, thank you for your question. Thank you for your clarification. Yes, no, we will not be having a restaurant, or a bike and ski shop, or a public gathering space in the 3,800 facility. However, the 3,800 facility will be the headquarters for Loped Adventures, which is the program that has been running for 15 years now as under the Loped umbrella that does all of its North Minneapolis work. So servicing kids in North Minneapolis and through the schools and through the parks. So we will have office space there. We'll have facilities for storing and working on the bicycles and skis and other equipment, canoes, whatever that we're working with the kids with. And it'll have space to work on that stuff. It'll have some yard space because we need that for the trailers and whatnot, for boats and whatever that we're doing the work with the kids on. So all of those things will be going into that facility. And then, like Mr. Terrell said, there is greenhouses next door. We're working on what beneficial use those will have, but we're really hoping for some kind of community-based participation in the greenhouse spaces.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So will there be any external facing piece at this particular location that will be engaging with the community externally?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Cunningham, not at the outset. It's possible that the greenhouse facility will have that. So I think there's visions of having, and I think there's a few different entities that are thinking of this, contemplating. So Project Sweetie Pie was referred to. The Park Board has talked about doing things where you bring youth in, teaching them horticulture and skills around growing plants and so forth, both in the greenhouse facility, but also in the yard space is what I think they're thinking of.
Great. Yeah, we just don't have a lot of activated spaces that are externally facing to engage with the community, like a bike shop or something like that. And so just wanted to check in to see what that space would be used for. Thank you so much.
Further comments or questions for either Mr. Munger or Mr. Terrell? Okay, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham, did you want to move approval?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move approval of the loan for the Loppet Foundation Auxiliary Building Project at 3800 Humboldt Avenue North.
Are there further comments or questions on the motion to approve? I also want to add my thanks to the project team. This has been a long road. Since we are not a grant maker, that is not our job. And Jim has worked really hard to ensure that we're not making a grant here, but alone I noticed in the report my idea of a ticket tax or surcharge as a backup financing mechanism. And I just want to note this is not a grant. It's not a forgivable loan. It's a loan. And we'll be monitoring to make sure that it is slowly but surely paid off over time to assist in getting under construction and to be moving. I think this is a very good deal for all of the parties involved, and I'm excited you're able to move forward after this very long time coming. Further comments or questions? Seeing none on Councilmember Cunningham's motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Thank you for being here. We'll move on to our last item. Ms. Perel, welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Rebecca Perel with Business Development in CPED, and here today presenting a recommendation to approve 19 Great Streets Business District Support Grant contracts totaling $484,760 to fund commercial district revitalization activities in the Great Streets eligible commercial districts throughout the city of Minneapolis. Some of those activities include marketing and branding, business engagement, business education, events, business recruitment, and placemaking activities. The Great Streets program was created in 2007, that's 10 years ago, or 11 years ago now, to support the vitality of Minneapolis neighborhood business districts through 3 different programs. That's the facade improvement matching grants, the real estate redevelopment gap loan financing program, and then these business district support contracts that are in front of you today. The Business District Support Program is intentionally open to supporting a variety of activities. Some of those are new and innovative approaches to commercial revitalization. Others are the bread and butter of work that organizations do to support businesses and business districts throughout Minneapolis. All of the organizations that are recommended here today share the goal to support commercial vitality, strengthen small businesses, and promote overall business district support or district success. Through the Business District Support Grants, there have been 10 rounds previous to the recommendations today, and we've funded $4.4 million of commercial revitalization activities throughout those 10 years. In January of this year, we issued the annual request for proposals and received 22 submittals requesting funds in excess of $850,000. The program asks for dollars that are leveraged through the various activities that are requested, and that can include things like foundation investments, membership dues, volunteer hours, business sponsorships, and other types of leverage. The proposals that are recommended today will leverage over $860,000 of outside non-city funding. Lastly, I do need to note that there's one numerical error in the report's item description. It notes that the Northeast Chamber of Commerce is noted incorrectly. It should be $39,950. So it's a few thousand off. My apologies on that.
Not a problem.
With that, I can take any questions.
Are there any questions for staff on item number 9? Seeing none, thank you very much for your report. Councilmember Ellison.
Madam Chair, I will move to approve the Great Streets 2018 Business District Support Grant Agreements.
On the motion to approve, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.